Hughie Campbell's character continues to grow, showing us levels in Season 4 of The Boys. He has always stood out like a sore thumb in a team packed with experienced, skilled, and oftentimes dirty soup killers, being none of those things himself. But his is a story of an ordinary guy coming into his own to achieve extraordinary things. While he's currently scarred by having to administer a lethal injection to his caring father, he's the moral compass for the boys, and will undoubtedly land himself in a Twister-like situation if we're to go by the comics, which have been the series' inspiration. So let's dive into some of the places the series has steered away from the comics, while discussing the subtle references that still bind them both together. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Number 1. From Scottish roots to an everyday American guy. Comic Hughie's origins go back to the rural town of Auchterloddle in Scotland. As an adopted child, he lived with his loving parents and never had the inclination to seek out his biological parents. His quiet and content life is shattered the day A-Train kills his girlfriend. He accepts Billy Butcher's offer to join the boys, which brings him to America, and his life gets a lot darker, albeit exciting. In comparison, the Prime series starts Hughie out as an everyday nice American guy, with a good enough job and a good enough life, with his father, but he's rife with repressed emotions and unexpressed views. He isn't always able to say what he wants and claim his fair share in life, but one incident, quite similar to his comic counterpart, changes it all, and he's set on a path of no return. He has no skills for being a soup killer. He has to use his common sense and learn on the job, which is very relatable to the viewers, unless we've got some secret crime-fighting vigilantes watching here. Well, hello to you too. His journey from just good enough to smart to a gutsy soup killer is an underdog tale, and he makes it look good. His sweet nature shines through, even as he is gutting soups, and sometimes other guys who get in the boys' way. And that's a pretty hard thing to pull off.
Butcher? You're what?
Number 2. A look at Hughie's appearance. The most apparent difference between Hughie in the comics versus the Prime series is the way he looks. The guy from Scotland has a strawberry blonde goatee and a buzz cut, and is kind of like a younger Simon Pegg, who is, by the way, playing Hughie's father in the Prime series. The Hughie we're used to seeing on TV, played by Jack Quaid, has plush dark hair and is clean-shaven. He's also generally quite different in every other way: shape and size, bone structure, height, and so on.
Yeah, Dad, it's me, it's Hughie. Where are we?
Number 3. Adopted in the comics versus Hughie Campbell Sr.'s biological son in the TV series. Comic Hughie has a wholesome life with his adoptive parents back in Scotland, who are always there for him. There's a considerable backstory to the character, and there were instances of him being rather irritated with his parents as a kid, but later in life, he realizes how special they were. He visits their graves and laments his despair, feeling their presence even long after they've passed. He loved them to bits, and Butcher used this supposed weakness to trick Hughie into finishing him off at the very end. In the TV series, however, Hughie's very much the flesh and blood of the Campbells. He lived with his father before he began working full-time in the soup-killing business. His mother was estranged from the family when he was 6 years old. Another noticeable difference here is that Hughie's father's name has changed from comics to series. His adoptive father is called Alexander Fergus Campbell, while Hughie's mother's name, Daphne, remains the same in both versions of The Boys. We've watched his father in the Prime series as Hugh Campbell Sr. It is probably an ode to Simon Pegg, who was supposed to play Hughie in the show, but couldn't because he was too old to play the character. Thus, we've got him going by Hughie Sr., a sweet man who loves to chat with Hughie Jr. about his Dan Browns and other books and is often worried about his son. The latest deflection the series takes from the source material is Hughie sneaking a vial of V into his father's hospital room. After it's administered, he wakes up seemingly better, but it quickly becomes clear that he's not himself. He's mentally muddled up and also has gained some powers. Let's look at that next as we get into Hughie's role in his father's death.
I have never told you everything. I have never told you how much I hate sitting on that couch.
Number 4. Hughie's connection with his father's fate. In Season 4 of the Prime series, we watch Hughie struggle with the grave question concerning his father's coma. Marred with desperation, Hughie obtains Compound V to revive his father, which Butcher catches him doing and advises him against it. Hughie takes the V to his bedridden father, but takes heed of Butcher's words and doesn't administer it. He leaves his jacket with the V secured in its pocket inside the hospital room. When he returns, the blue liquid is shown seeping into his father's bloodstream through the IV. No thanks to his mom, Daphne, and his father's hand begins to twitch. To Hughie's surprise, Hugh Sr. wakes up quite upbeat, but it's not long before he starts to show signs of being mentally off. Later, he goes for a walk and ends up wandering into some people, like literally into their skin, tissue, muscles, and organs, and it's absolutely gruesome. And one thing has got to be said here, Simon Pegg killed that scene. His poignant portrayal of a mentally confused man with uncontrollable powers and an axe to grind with his ex is phenomenal. Later, he approves of his son's decision to give him a lethal dose, even though he's scared out of his bones at the thought of death, and man, that moment could fetch tears from a rock. It's a shame he didn't play a more significant role in the series. Comic Hughie never has to live through any such tragedy though. His parents have a content life and die of old age, as revealed in the comic issue titled The Boys, Dear Becky. Number 5. How Temp V transforms Hughie. In Season 3 of the Prime series, Hughie asks Butcher to give him Temp V because he wants some superpowers himself, maybe feeling a little emasculated with Starlight doing all the heavy lifting and saving, and so he transforms temporarily into a naked teleporter, which is kind of funny. Using his powers for the first time, saving Mother's milk from the Russian guard by teleporting between them and punching a hole clear through the guy's stomach. Hughie is overjoyed. This is after he instinctively apologizes to the poor sod for killing. I mean, it's still sweet Hughie after all. He also gets loaded with super strength and durability to go along with the sly and swift displacement powers. Aside from the punching a hole in the stomach part, Comic Hughie's first experience with the chemical is quite different. Butcher sneaks a Compound V shot into Hughie before his first mission, and Hughie isn't ecstatic about it. Unlike in the series, he doesn't appreciate the fact that Butcher has basically given him superpowers without even asking. Later, the boys get into an all-out fight with the team of Soups, and Hughie, not realizing his compounded strength, punches Blarney Cock, leaving him with a fist-sized hole in his stomach. We'll talk more about that fight in just a bit, but the thing to observe here is that unlike his Prime series counterpart, Comic Hughie was horrified by what he had done. Comic Hughie is even more conscientious sometimes than the TV version. Also, he has no teleporting abilities, not a scratch. It's the regular V order, super strength and super durability, but with one extra thing. There's a spike in his intelligence level too, which he uses while solving cases with the boys.
Laughing. Like she's a joke.
Number 6. The first mission. Hughie's first mission in the Prime series is bugging the Seven's HQ in the Vought Tower, and while he's all up in jitters about it, he rises to the occasion and plants that thing. Of course, later on, Translucent tails him and Butcher, after which Translucent and him brawl it out. Hughie electrocutes Translucent, but Translucent survives, only to be blown to bits by Hughie, following his unfortunate colonoscopy. But Hughie's first mission in the comics is totally different. The boys have their eyes set on a soup team called Teenage Kicks. After Butcher gives Hughie a shot of Compound V, which hardly goes down well with him, Hughie is superpowered. Teenage Kicks find out that they've been under surveillance, and Big Game, their leader, gets into a street fight with the boys over it. They had obviously underestimated the boys, who end up reducing Kicks to decapitated, writhing worms. This is also the time Hughie turned Blarney Cock into a Fruit Loop with his new superpowers. Number 7. TV series reimagining Hughie's connection with A-Train. The series starts with a similar angle to the comics regarding the A-Train-Hughie dynamic. A-Train kills Hughie's girlfriend Robin, and then later laughs about it with his soup friends. Hughie joins the boys because of the trauma he suffers at his beloved's death. He's seething with hatred and wants revenge on the Soups, especially A-Train. But where the series branches out from the comics is how it ends things between Hughie and A-Train. The comics gave A-Train a brutal send-off. Butcher has already punished A-Train and tied him up so Hughie can have a go at him. But Hughie's not a guy who kills somebody at the drop of a hat, at least when he isn't himself under attack. So Butcher turns on a recording of A-Train laughing over Robin's death to push Hughie over the edge, and he's rewarded as Hughie goes into a frenzy and kicks A-Train's head off. The series, however, is giving A-Train a chance to mend his ways. He's seen as someone who's trying to do it right, even though it feels like an impossible task working under Homelander. He steals a vial of Compound V for Hughie, which, as you'll recall, Hughie's mom injected his dad with, and with that, Hughie finds it in his heart to forgive A-Train. It's probably a reaction to Hughie coming to terms with his mother showing up in his life again, and reflecting on giving people second chances. But it makes for a clean break with A-Train in the show.
Lad can think for himself.
Number 8. Hughie's childhood friends. Another facet of Hughie's comics origins that do not factor into the series are his childhood friends. They give the story of little Hughie some of that paper boat in a pond feel. His friends, Det and Big Bobby being the smelly one, were around for a lot of his kiddie adventures. Though Hughie was always the kinder soul among them, like when his friends indulged in some nasty sport with a dog, it was Hughie who got upset and brought the dog back to his owners to get patched up. The trio also once uncovered a local pub owner's cigarette smuggling trade because of Hughie's fondness for playing the detective. The Prime series has little reference to Hughie's childhood, other than his mother leaving his father and him when he was just a kid, under a bout of depression. Number 9. Hughie has a superhero costume. Believe it or not, Hughie has a superhero costume in the comics, and the boys are almost rolling on the floor when they first see him in it. It's red and green and super snug with lavender boots. Totally and utterly asinine. If you thought seeing the series Hughie teleport in the nude was funny, imagine him wearing this elfin disaster. Where does comic Hughie use this atrocity? Let's find out up ahead. Number 10. Connection with Gman. Comic Hughie infiltrates the Gman undercover after Silver Kincaid's death as a Vought soup named Bagpipe. I mean, his American accent sucks, so the boys had to make up a Scottish soup name for him. Honestly, the boys were just roasting Hughie with the code name, and that silly little costume they got for him. Silver Kincaid, whose powers allowed her to create gravitational fields and pressure, also belonged to Gman, and committed suicide by bleeding herself out. She had a dark past as the rest of the kids in the team, who were adopted and injected with V by John Goldokin, the creator of the team. If you want to know more about the Gman, Teenage Kicks, or other soup teams Vought has up its sleeve, we have a video ranking 10 murderous and psychotic teams from the boys' universe. Be sure to check that out. Moving on, the undercover Hughie spent his day with some young and nasty G-Wiz guys, a team under the Supreme G-Men, and they were partying up at the G-Wiz house. During the festivities, they even prank called the 7 headquarters and let Jack, the Jupiter, fill his ears with their very own bodily noises. Go figure. They later visit the main Goldokin residence, where Hughie struts about in his hilarious red and green costume. He bugs the house good and gets back to the boys with all the dirty details about G-Wiz's criminal plans. Nothing like this has played out in the TV series yet, but the show's still going, and we never know. The G-Men may make it on air one day. Number 11. Hughie being in the dark about superheroes. Comic Hughie lived a quaint life in a small town and had no idea about any of the soups, who were considered pop culture superstars in the boys' world, until he first came to America. This is a little strange because the comics are set in a World Wide Web powered realm. It's like today, even a kid sitting in Christmas Island probably knows that that's Beyonce's face on the shampoo bottle or the Pepsi can, and Hughie, raised in the North Atlantic, lived a lot closer to the world's pop culture capital. In the TV series, however, Hughie knows all about the Vought stars and even has some soup posters up in his room, which shows he may have been a fan to start with. Of course, him being born and raised in the US has something to do with it. Overall, it comes across as a more candid scenario than the comics. Number 12. A nickname comparison in the boys. Comic Hughie is widely known as Wee Hughie among the boys. It's obviously due to his apparent height and build difference compared to the other boys in the team. In his very Frenchy way, Frenchie calls him Petit Hughie, and Hughie is okay with it. In the TV series, the one time Hughie was called Wee Hughie by Frenchie, he nipped it in the bud with a quick snip by saying, "I'm 6'1". But when, with his dying breath, his father calls him My Wee Hughie, it sounds like Hughie prefers to reserve that privilege and tenderness for his father alone. Of course, Jack Quaid is quite a bit taller than the character from the comics appears to be, but we, for one, like that nickname. It was given out of affection and carried a reminder of his comics version's Scottish roots. Marvelous verdict. Hughie Campbell is the most relatable guy on the boys' block, and he doesn't have an insanely dark past driving him to become a double-edged iron hack. He's just a regular guy with dignity who cannot get over the trauma of seeing his girlfriend murdered and steps into a dark path to avenge her before he can fully comprehend what's happening. A lot of the time, it feels like he's in over his head, but he comes around, takes it all in, and grows a lot as a character. And it's a natural development that the audience can truly relate to. Also, Hughie is genuinely a good guy. He has a kind of streak that often reminds Butcher of his younger brother, Lenny, and that's why Butcher cultivates a closeness for Hughie and tries to protect him whenever he can. Hughie's base character does not change much from the comics to the series, and the biggest change we've seen so far is the way that the TV series Hughie's father is taken to his end, which was far more aggravating than his sublime passing in the comics. But the great sorrow and despair that comes with losing a dear one, the guilt of not doing enough when they had lived, is a heavy sword to have to hang over someone's head. There are many prospects in that tragically beautiful drama for the growth of Hughie's character, and it's just one of the ways the boys continues to glue the fans to their seats as it marches on to the tail end of the season. Where will Hughie go from here? Back to the good old boys intel gathering role? Maybe into Starlight's arms for a reassuring cuddle? Or will his fate get darker like the comics? You tell me. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.